All right, you're stopped at a stop sign after school. Unfortunately, another student who's behind you is not paying attention. They don't hit you, but they leave a skid mark of 134 feet. So, cop pulls over the car behind you. Speed limit's 40. See how fast they were going. So, S squared, their speed, divided by 24 equals the braking distance of 134 feet. So, solve for S. So this is a square root problem. First, we got to multiply by 24. Okay? When we do that, 134 times 24, put in the calculator, is 3216. So S squared equals 3216. To get rid of the square, we square root both sides. And then we just type in square root of 3216. And that means his speed was 56.70971 miles per hour. So yes, he should get a speeding ticket. He was going over 40. Number 2, you kick a ball off a building that's 64 feet above the ground. Now remember, 64 feet is the initial height. That is your starting point. That is your C, that is your y-intercept. You kick it 48 feet per second. That's your B. So, negative 16t squared plus 48t plus 64. And that equals h of t. Height as a function of time. When will the ball reach the highest point? Okay, when you see the word highest point, and what is the highest point? That is the vertex. Okay, so x comma y. We get the x coordinate from doing the opposite of b over 2a. That's a 1 there. Okay, so that's negative 48 divided by negative 32, which is 1.5. So that means in 1.5 seconds, it hits the highest point. Now, there's two ways to do this. For 1.5, you can put 1.5, I'm sorry, I forgot the t up here. You can put 1.5 in there, so negative 16, 1.5 squared, plus 48 times 1.5, plus 64. And you can crunch the numbers. Or you can pull up your graphing calculator, go to y equals, clear it out, and put in negative 16x squared. I think it was 48, was it? Yeah. Plus 48x plus 64. And graphing it won't do you much good. But if you go to the table, you can see various important information. Now look, notice that 1 second and 2 seconds, both 96. It's somewhere in between there at 1.5. Now there's two ways to do this. If you go to your settings for the window, you can tell it to change instead of by 1. You can tell it to change by 0.5. And then, when you go to your table, it'll give you 1.5 of 100 feet. Now, this is the same thing you would have gotten if you would have crunched the numbers right here. Okay? So the vertex is at 1.5, 100. Even if you want to crunch the numbers by hand, why not at least use your graphing calculator to verify? Okay? Where will it be after 2 seconds? Again, you could plug in a 2. Negative 16, 2 squared, plus 48 times 2, plus 64. Or you can just go to the calculator and look at 2 seconds and get 96 feet. When does it hit the ground? The ground is 0. So let's look at our graphing calculator. If there's a 0 on here, we can just use that. If not, we have to factor. Notice it says 4, 0. That means in 4 seconds it hits the ground. Now if we didn't know that, we could do negative 16 t squared plus 48t plus 64. This is not that bad to factor because we can take a negative 16 out, GCF, and just get t squared minus 3t minus 4. All right? That's an easy one to factor. Two numbers that multiply give you 4 that differ by 3. We want more negatives. But now when we factor that, we get 4 and negative 1. And you cannot have a negative time, so there's your 4 seconds. Okay, and then it doesn't say this, but let's graph it, because I think that's why the graph's there. Maybe it did in the upper instructions. Well, doesn't really say anywhere, but let's graph it. So I'm going to put 0 here. I'm going to skip some spaces, 2, 3, 4. I already know it's going to hit at 4, 0. Let's put a dot there. Its initial starting height was 64 feet. So, and its maximum is 100. So I'm going to go 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. All right. Now, the initial height was 64. So there's 60, 70, 64 is about right there. Remember, we looked at the calculator, and at 1 second and 2 seconds, it was both at 96. So I can go to 1 and go, 96, and go to 2, 96, and at 1.5, right here, it's exactly at 100. And that gives me a good idea of what this looks like. Right there. That's my graph. Okay? All right. Solve using square root property. All right. So we got to get the squared portion by itself. So first thing we're going to do is subtract 5. So negative 9, leave this alone, equals negative 67 minus 5 is negative 72. Now we divide by negative 9. That gives me x minus 6 squared equals positive 8. Square root both sides. Okay. And I get x minus 6 equals plus or minus the square root of 8. Now remember, 8 breaks down to 4 times 2, so radical 8 breaks down to radical 4 times radical 2. This is going to come out as a 2, so x minus 6, actually, we'll move that over now. Add 6 to both sides. X equals 6 plus or minus 2 root 2. So 6 plus or minus 2 root 2. Next one. I need to move the 343 over. So 7x squared equals negative 343. Divide by 7. 343 divided by 7 is 49. So I get x squared equals negative 49. Square root both sides. X equals plus or minus. Now remember, the 49 is going to come out as a 7, and the negative comes out as an I. So my answer is plus or minus 7i. This one's ready to go. This is already by itself, so I just simply square root both sides. X plus 2 equals plus or minus 7. And then I'm going to do x equals 2 plus 7 and x equals 2 minus 7. So 2 plus 7 is 9. 2 minus 7 is negative 5. I just made a silly mistake, but it's okay to point it out. I'm subtracting 2. Okay? So that's negative 2 plus 7 and negative 2 minus 7, which means 5 and negative 9. Okay? Very simple mistake. It happens. No big deal. Right, this one says use the quadratic formula, but we can't do that until this bad boy is over here. Remember, it's always got to be equal to 0. 9x squared plus 12x plus 4 equals 0. So, x equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I like to do that so I have a place to put my numbers when I identify a, b, and c. A is 9, b is 12, c is 4. So, b goes here, b goes here, a goes here, c, and a again. And now it's just simple number crunching. Okay? So, x equals the opposite of 12 plus or minus 144, square root of 144 minus 4 times 4 is 16, and 16 times 9 is 169. Sorry, I'm going to roll. I typed in 19 into my calculator instead of 9. So this ends up being 144 over 18. Well, 144 minus 144 is 0. The square root of 0 is 0. Okay, so that's going to give me x equals negative 12 over 18. Because plus or minus 0 doesn't make any difference. And that reduces, okay, 6 goes into 12 twice, 18 3 times, so negative 2/3. Right, number 7. Again, use the quadratic formula. So, a, b, c, 2, negative 5, 19. There's the 19 I was looking for. So, again, x equals opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So, this is why I like to put this in first, because notice my b is negative. That doesn't mean I just write negative 5. It's still the opposite of negative 5. I'm going to square negative 5 here. Remember, when we put this in the calculator, we should get positive 25. But if you type in negative 5 squared, you will get negative 25 on the calculator. You have to be smarter than the calculator. C is 19, and A is 2 again. So, x equals the opposite of negative 5 is positive 5. Square root 25 minus, okay, 4 times 2 is 8. And then 8 times 19 is 152 over 4. X equals 5 plus or minus square root of 25 minus 152 is 127 over 4. We keep going. Now, 127 is, you can check to see whether, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64. None of these numbers go into 127. So it's actually a prime number. But the negative can come out. So x equals 5 plus or minus I root 127 over 4. And that's our answer. All right, for this next one, notice it says put it into vertex form by completing the square. So we're going to complete the square, but we're not going to solve. Traditionally, we're going to put in vertex form. Okay? So when we do that, remember, first step is leave a space when we move the 14 over to the other side. Now, the little cheat is, write this ahead of time, take half of this number, square it. Okay, when we do that, we end up with negative 10. So, now I want x minus 2 by itself, so I'm going to square root both sides. That gives me x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 10. Now 10 cannot be reduced by any perfect squares, but the negative can come out. So I'm going to move the 2 over, plus 2, plus or minus I root 10. That's all I can do on that one. All right, complete the square. This time we're solving. So similar idea, but we're solving. And actually, we're not going to do this one the way it is. I'm going to make it a little bit different. X squared plus 4x plus 8, because we did not do these type in class. All right, equals 0. So it's going to be x squared plus 4x, leave a space, equals negative 8. Do this ahead of time. Half of 4 is 2. Squared is plus 4. I'm going to add 4 here. That's going to give me negative 4 right here. Square root both sides. That gives me x plus 2 equals plus or minus. Square root of 4 is 2. And negative comes out as an I. And then I subtract 2. X equals negative 2 plus or minus 2i. That is my solution. Okay? I'm going to go back up here. I did forget. I actually solved the previous one, and I meant to leave it in vertex form. So for this one, before I square rooted, I would have left it x minus 2 and said f of x equals x minus 2 squared. I would have moved the negative 10 over, and boom. Therefore, my vertex would have been 2, 10. Okay, so this is the solution, and this is vertex form. Sorry about that. Just got so excited to solve it. All right, number 10. You can use any method you want for this one. Okay. Doesn't really matter. It is going to factor nicely. So because I'm going to first take out GCF. So I'm going to take out a 4. So it's going to be 4 2x squared minus x minus 6. All right. Now, you can guess and check. I'm going to real quickly do the AC method. So a times c is negative 12. B is negative 1. I need two numbers that multiply to give me negative 12 that differ by 1. That's going to be 4 and 3. And I want more negatives, so that's negative 4. So I'm going to rewrite this. 2x squared minus 4x plus 3x minus 6. And now I'm going to factor by grouping. So that's going to be these two. I'm going to put the 4 out here, use the bracket. I'm going to take a 2x out and get x minus 2. I know I'm going to have an x minus 2 over here. So what do I have to divide by? I have to divide by 3. So that gives me 2x plus 3 and x minus 2. Again, equal to 0 the whole way down. So when I do that, This gives me negative 3/2, and this gives me positive 2 for solution. You could use a quadratic formula. You could just then guess and check. Whatever works for you. Your choice. My choice was factoring with the AC method. Kind of a guided guess and check. Okay, the discriminant. Remember, the discriminant is just the b squared minus 4ac, part of the quadratic formula. So, a is 1, b negative 6, and c is 9. So, negative 6 squared, remember, parentheses, or it's always positive, minus 4 times 1 times 9. All right? So that's going to give me 36 minus 36, which means my discriminant is 0. That means I am going to have 1 0, and it's going to be real. Okay? Technically real rational, but real is good enough. Okay, discriminant. A is negative 3, B is 4, C is negative 5. So B squared minus 4AC. So that's going to be 16. Negative 4 times negative 3 is positive 12. Minus times negative 5 is minus 60. That means my discriminant is negative 44. So that gives me 2 imaginary, or you could say 2 complex answers. Find the discriminant. Notice, not equal to 0. So A is 3, B is 22, but C is negative 16. Very important. So B squared, 22 squared, minus 4 times 3 times negative 16. Okay, remember that's going to be negative times negative is positive. So that's going to give me 676 for my discriminant. That means I'm going to have 2 real rational answers. But 2 real is fine enough. Okay, last but not least of these. Again, move the 24 over. So A is 1, B is 11, and C is negative 24. So B squared minus 4 times A times C. Again, I'm going to end up with a positive number, but this time it's not a perfect square. So this time 217 means 1, and again it's going to be real. The only difference is this is real irrational, where the previous one was rational. But I am fine, and it should have been 2, sorry. I think I said 2. 2 real answers. Okay? And that's good enough. Last but not least, a good old real world problem. Now this time it says the height of the ball is given by this equation. It's in vertex form. All right? So it says, what does this equation tell us about the height of the ball? It gives us the vertex, which is, inside lies, 472, which means 72 feet maximum height in 4 seconds. Write an equivalent equation that represents the starting height of the ball, and what is the starting height. So in other words, we have to turn that into standard form. Okay? So we need to do the math. Negative 2, x minus 4 squared plus 72. So if we square x minus 4, we get x squared, multiply and double, negative 8x plus 16 plus 72. Now distribute the negative 2. So negative 2x squared plus 16x minus 32 plus 72. And that simplifies to negative 2x squared plus 16x and 72 minus 32 is 40. So remember, my C is my starting height of 40 feet. That's where it was launched from. Write an equivalent equation that will represent the height of the ball when the height of the ball is 0. That means we want to get into factored form. So we take that negative 2x squared plus 16x plus 40, and we're going to factor it. Easiest way to do that is first take the negative 2 out. GCF, x squared minus 8x minus 20. So now we need two numbers that multiply to give us 20 that differ by 2. So 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. That's going to be 10 and 2. Now, we want more negatives left over than positives. So that gives me x equals 10 and x equals negative 2. We cannot have a negative time, so that means in 10 seconds it will hit the ground. And that is it for your review.